Did you know that this bear was actually created using 3 different stock images? Hello everybody, welcome to this video. If you are new here, I am Nouri Radwan, I am the concept artist for this channel, and you are tuned to photomanipulation.com. And in today's video, I'm going to show you how to blend different stock images together and create one original beast. I'm also going to show you how to create this entire scene, including some hacks and tricks on how to add water splashes, flying dirt and snow, and more extra small details. So without any further ado, let's start with the video. Before we start the tutorial, I forgot to talk about this. So this is stock images from Adobe Stock. These are images of powder explosions and water splashes. All the links are going to be down in the description. And I use these images to create a whole group of this water splashes, this powder explosions. It's very easy to turn a stock image to a brush. So basically, first, make sure the color of the image is black and white by clicking on Shift Control Alt U. That will turn it into black and white. And then click Control I. That will make the explosion black and the background white. And then you can go to Edit. If you don't find the Define Brush preset available, that means the size of this image is above 5,000 pixels. So go to Image, Image Size, and make sure they are connected, they lock together, and then add the slash and put 1.7 or 1.5, and then click OK. And then you go to Edit, Define Brush, and you can name it whatever you want, and now you have it as a brush. The first thing I did is I painted the sketch, and to do that I used the soft brush, and I used the color menu to change the brightness of the color that I'm using. I started using a value of 80% for the background, and the closer that I get to the eye, I made the objects darker, as you can see with the ground and these trees. And this is just a simple sketch I painted using a mouse, so I don't get lost in the process of making this artwork. And I just want to mention that this artwork is inspired by the cover of The Rise of Tomb Raider, or Tomb Raider. I'm not sure how to pronounce it. I use this stock image, and this stock image I got from Adobe Stock. You will find all the links in the description, and I just used eraser to erase the edges. For this mod stock image, I used the color range, and I sample the color of the mod. Then I click and hold Shift to sample the colors that's besides the mod, to give myself a wider range, as you can see in the preview. I click OK, I add the mask, and then I click on Control L to bring the level menu to add contrast to the mask, and then I add blur, and then again with the with the levels, Control L, I give the mask more contrast. Now I click on the select and mask from the select menu, and then I add radius, and then I click OK, and again I use the level to add more contrast to the mask. I apply the mask, I copy the image, and I paste it on the artwork, and I do the same with this one right here. Select, and then I go to select menu, I click and hold Shift, and then I click on select and mask. I add radius and some feather and contrast, and then I click OK. I copy and paste to the artwork. This is just me placing the stock images. I use the select and mask to make the grass on the first stock image red, just like the colors of the second stock image, or the third one. I just want to match the colors of this grass with this grass right here. And to do that, I use the selective color. One is set to color blending mode, where I add the red color. And the second one is going to be set to saturation mode. And that's to make it more saturated or less saturated, depends on the color that I'm trying to match it with. I copy and paste. And as you can see, this stock image has green grass, and to match it with the other grass color, I add a selective color adjustment layer. I go to the yellow and green, and I add the red tone to the grass, as you can see, which is the red is the opposite of cyan. This is why I decrease the cyan to add red, and then I add magenta and yellow. This is a new stock image that is going to be used, but before I used it, I realized that there's an effect applied to it, which is making it warm. So what I did is I used the camera raw filter, and then I clicked on the white balance pick tool, and I selected the sky because it's supposed to be the the whitest thing in this whole image, and that gave it more natural colors. Now it's ready to use, so I used the method of the select and mask. Now with the mud that I cut in the beginning of the video, I used the eraser to erase the edges, and I wanted to add it to a place where it feels like it blends. I used the selective color to give it a warm color, and as you can see, I'm affecting the naturals right here. I gave it red, magenta, and yellow. Here's the second one, is affecting the saturation, and to duplicate it, just click on the first adjustment layer, keep holding Alt and drag it, and that will add a second adjustment layer to the layers menu. Here, this one is set to luminosity, as you can see, and I wanted to make it just a bit brighter, and I wanted to desaturate it. Then I merged all of the layers together, the mud layer with the rest of the selective color adjustment layers. Then I used the hue and saturation to desaturate it and decrease the lightness. What I'm doing right now is I selected a color from the background, and then I used the gradient tool, the transparent one and the linear one, just to add this fog effect. And as you can see, what I did right here is I selected the trees and I dragged them above the new fog that I painted, which is this one. I added the mask and I started to hide more of the trees from the bottom. Here I painted smoke, and then I go back to the brightness in the color menu to make it dark, and then I make it brighter, and then I make it darker, and then I made it brighter, because as you can see, if you are going to add like snow, dirt, smoke, you can't add them in one color. You will have to play or change the brightness every time. As you can see, it starts dark right here, and it gets brighter just for the realism, because I don't want it to add it as a one color. I painted it, and then I used the mask to get rid of these areas. As you can see, now it looks perfect, and I changed the blending mode to lighting. Now I added this fog between the trees and the ground. Okay, now I need you to focus. Look at the puddles of this stock image and this stock image. They don't blend together, because these ones are less bright and they have this greenish color, and these ones are bright and they have this bluish magenta color. So what I did is I went to this stock image, as you can see right here. I clicked on it. I clicked and hold Alt. I dragged it all the way to the top. Now I have it in a new layer. I added a new empty layer beneath it, and I filled it with black. And then I go to the channels. I try to find the channel with the more contrast between the puddles, the water, and the grass. And I found it's the blue channel. So what I did is I selected by clicking Control and then the blue channel, and then I click on this icon right here to add the Alpha 1 channel. While the puddles are selected, I go to Image, Apply Image. I change the blending mode to Screen to make them brighter, and then I right click and I click on Select Inverse to inverse the selection, and I go to the image, Apply Image, and then I chose multiply, and that will make it darker. Then I click on Control L. This is the levels menu, and then I try to make more contrast between them. Now when I click Control and the alpha channel, it will select the puddles. Now I can affect the puddles individually without affecting the grass. While the selection is active, I added brightness and contrast adjustment layer, as you can see right here. Now it has the mask of the puddles. I dragged it to the top of the adjustment layers. That's clipped to the stock image of this image. I add brightness to match the brightness of these puddles with the puddle of this stock image. Now I did the same with the puddles of the other stock image. And what I'm doing right now is I'm using the gradient tool, black color, vivid light, linear mode, and I start to paint on the areas that is far from the puddles to give myself a room. And then I click Ctrl L, I add contrast, and now I have the puddles selected individually. I take this selection, I add brightness and contrast, and I made them just a bit brighter to match the brightness and to match the color of the puddles, these green ones with this magenta one. What I do is I add a color balance adjustment layer. I click and hold Alt and I drag this mask to the color balance so I can only affect the puddle, and then I change the blending mode to color, and then I add magenta to the midtones and blue to the highlights, and now they match in the color. Next, I got the stock image of the snow, and then I go back to my artwork. I add an empty layer at the top. Sorry, I click Shift Control Alt E to merge all the layers together, and this is the final image merged together. I go to select, I click on color range, and I start to I click and hold Shift, and then I start to click on the grass to give myself a wider range, because I wanted that snow to be only pasted above the grass and not the water. I did it again, and I was looking for less fuzziness, sorry. And then I click on Shift Control Alt V, and that will paste it with the mask, as you can see. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to click on the mask, and then I go to select and mask. I add radius just a bit. Okay, and then you can barely see the snow. So what I did is I clicked on the mask, click Ctrl L to bring more of the snow, and as you can see, there's snow here and bits right there and there. Using the eraser, I think I erased some of the areas. I didn't. So this is another stock image that has snow on grass. It looks perfect. So what I did is I clicked on color range. I selected the snow, and as you can see, there's a plus sign on the color pick because I'm holding the shift. If you don't want to use the shortcuts, you can click on here. Click OK, and then I deselected the trees and the sky. I go to select and mask. I add radius. Okay, so Control C to copy, Control V to paste, and now I have this snow on the grasses. So on the snow on the grass, sorry. And what I did after, I select the snow. Notice I select the snow, and then I go back to the stock image of the green grass. And while the snow is selected and I'm clicking on the green grass stock image, I go to select and mask. I add radius, and it will add radius depending on the stock image of the grass and not the snow that I just added. I click OK. I go to the snow layer. I inverse the selection and I click delete, and now it looks more blended. And with the help of the eraser tool, I start to erase on the edges. I desaturate it, and with exposure adjustment layer, I add more brightness to the snow. With the snow being bright and the puddles being bright also, I didn't like that the background didn't have that strong light that will cause these puddles and the snow to be bright. So what I did is I used the gradient tool, I used the star mode, vivid light, a bright color, and I start to drag it till I get the result that I wanted, which is a strong light source coming from the above that will cause this brightness on the puddles and the snow. I think I ended up with this one. Here was what I did here. I got another stock image of trees. I used the channels method to cut it, and I added to the background to make a busy background that has more details and not just trees going to the sky. I used the exposure to make it more faded and more dark, and as you can see, it's blended well. I added a selective color blending mode adjustment layer, sorry, and I added a cyan color. Now this is the excited part of the whole work, which is the bears. I got these four stock images of the bears. I used the select object tool. I click on the bear and the tool will select it for me. I use the lasso tool to correct some of the areas that the select object color didn't select because it's not perfect yet. What I'm trying to do now is I'm trying to find a good place for the bear using the rule of third, of course, because I wanted the bear to be aligned with this line right here, and the hunter, of course, will be in this line. This is the second bear, and I use the eraser tool to erase the legs because I wanted the legs of this bear. This stock image of this bear will end up not be used in the final image. I got this stock image of the third bear, and here I wanted only the head, so I scaled it and I removed the rest of his or her body, I don't know. And then I ended up using this fourth stock image. I like this more than the previous one because it looks like it's flexed. And then using the eraser, I start to hide some of the second bear stock image, the hand and some of the back. And this is the final composition of the bear that I wanted. I got the stock image, and what I wanted from it, I wanted the snow on the logs. I think that's what they call. And I used the channels, blue channel, to create more contrast, just so I can only select the snow. And of course, I turn the snow to black color, and I start turning them into brushes by by selecting them, and then go to edit, and then define brush presets, and that will make them brushes. And I made a whole group of snow brushes out of this image. It's time to fix the value of the bear with the 3 images of the bear, or 4 images. And at the beginning, it looked like it's already matching, so I didn't have to do a lot. Just a few tweaks with the brightness using the exposure. Right here, I added the hue and saturation adjustment layer to the legs. The legs looked too saturated, so I desaturated them. Now I want you to focus. What I did next is I clicked on the stock image of the bear, and then I clicked and hold Alt, and then I dragged it to the top. It's made a new copy of the bear stock image, and then I restorized the layer so it's not a smart object anymore. I apply the mask, and this is, by the way, the legs one. And now it's on black and white. And to turn it to black and white, click on Shift Control U. That will turn it into black and white. And what I do next is I go to Image, apply image, I chose multiply, I decreased the saturation to 50 or 70, and then I click on the layer 2 times to use the blend if. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to separate these two slides by clicking and holding Alt, and take the left slide all the way up to close to the middle. And then I turn the blending mode to multiply. I decrease the fill, and now it's dark, as you can see. And the reason why I'm doing that is because, let's see, after I add the mask and I turn it to black mask, look right here. I want you to focus on these areas of the bear that I'm using for the body, the main body. These areas are dark, but these ones are bright, so they don't match in the lighting or the values. And the reason why I did all of that is because I wanted to match these dark areas with the legs. So as I said before, I added a mask right here. It's turned to black, and I'm going to start painting with white soft brush with the flow of 10%. I start to paint on the areas that's close to that dark areas, as you can see. And now it looks more blended together because they have the same amount of brightness. And I'm going to do this step for the rest of the stock images of the bears. I did the same with the head. I add the mask, I turn it to multiply, I decrease the fill, I add a mask, turn it to black, and I start to paint on the areas that I want to be dark, just to match this area with these areas with these ones, and this one with these ones. And here I added an empty layer of the bear that I'm using for the head, and just using brush, soft brush, black color, flow to 10%. I start to dodge and burn his head to add some depth to his head, and also match some of the dark areas with the rest of the body. And I use the same method with the body right now. And as you can see, I start to paint it here because the bear that I use for the head has these dark areas just beneath his neck. So I want it to be dark line connecting them together. Now they look more blended together. And now it's time. I desaturated the head of the bear, and it's time to start coloring to match the colors. And to match the colors, what I did is I add an empty layer above every stock image of a bear. I set the blending mode to color. So for example, the first thing I did is I tried to match the colors of the body with the head. And what I do is I sample from the dark areas of the body, and I start to paint on the dark areas of the head. And then I sample the color of the midtones on the body, and I start to paint on the midtone of the head. And then I sample the colors from the highlights of the body, and I paint on the highlights of the head. So you get the ideas. I start to paint on the head, and now it's making the colors look matched. As you can see, I sampled from this desaturated blue that's in the highlights, and I start to paint it on the highlights of the head. And as you can see, it gives this perfect results. It's more perfect than using an adjustment layers of the curves and color balance. And what I do next is I click 2 times on the color empty layer that I add, and I use the blend if to separate the two white slides, so it's more realistic and it doesn't look like just a soft brush painted. I do the same to the legs. I sample from the body and start to paint on the legs on a color blender mode empty layer that I added, and clipped it to the legs of the bear. And I use the blend if to just affect the textures and add realism. To add more details, I used brush, water splash brush to add some of the saliva of the bear. You know, when the animals start growling, they spit some saliva from the mouth, from their mouths. Sorry. And then I used a water splash brush to add some of the splashes beneath the bear legs, just to add some action and movement to the image, as if the bear just stepped on the puddle and caused the water to splash. As you can see, I have these water splashes that I made from stock images from Adobe Stock. All of the links are going to be down in the description. And here I have these powder brushes. And the reason why I like to use powder because you can use it either as a snow or a dirt. And as you can see, I'm using more water splashes, and then I mask them. I add mask to them, and I start to delete and add in the mask, so it's not too much. I'm sorry to cut you here, but I'm just here to remind you to subscribe to the channel. Now I just merged all of the bear layers together, and now I have them in one bear. So now I'm working on this bear as if it was one stock image. Now I made the same technique at first when we were fixing the values of the bear. Now I duplicated the bear, I clipped it to the same bear. I clicked on Shift Control Alt U to make it black and white, and then I go to image, apply image, multiply, opacity 70. I turn it into multiply blending mode, and the fill to 50%. And of course, with the blend if, I took these two white slides to add the texture back, to bring the texture back. And then I clicked Control and then the bear to select it. Now it's selected. Then I go to select, modify, contract, and then I select a value of 30 pixels or 20 pixels. I used 30 pixels. Then I select feather, and I add feather in value of 50. Then I click select inverse. Now we are selecting all of the image but this area of the bear. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to click on the mask, and I click on delete. As you can see, I took the black color as a background. And by the way, if you are on a mask and the black color is on the background and you click on remove, then it's going to remove. But if you have the white color in the background, then it's going to add. So I took the black color in the background, and then I click delete, and as you can see, it's removed. And as you can see in the mask, it's removed the effect of the dark bear that we just added. And the reason why I did that is because I wanted the areas that's not facing the light source to be dark. I used the same mask, but I inverse it, and now I'm going to affect the area of the edges of the bear by adding a brightness and contrast, and then I check the use legacy and less contrast and more brightness, and as you can see, it added that halo effect. And the reason why it's because the light source is right behind the bear, so it's going to cause this halo effect in his edges. I removed it using the eraser and the black color as the background from the legs, because the legs are not because the light source is not behind the leg is just behind the upper body of the bear. And then I click on the mask of the brightness and contrast, and then I click Control L, and I start to decrease the spreadness of the effect of the brightness, because it looks like the halo was too much and it's going through all of his body. So I wanted to decrease it just a bit. Now it's time for the snow brushes that I told you about, that we just created. The reason why I made them just to add these details beneath the tree trunks and the legs and to add some realism to the image. I sample the color of this snow and I start to paint beneath the objects, just to make it look like the snow is going through the tree trunk and the tree base. I used this dog that was wounded. I like the look of this wound, and I wanted to add it to the bear. So select and mask to add radius for the fur. Contrast, okay, Control C, Control V to copy it, to paste it. And then I start to place it on the bear. Then I fix the values with the exposure, flip to the wound. And then I use the same method for the fur on the fur of the new wounds. As you can see, I wanted this part to be the eraser for me. So inverse, fill it with black on the mask. And then I delete, and then I use the move tool to start erasing some of the white fur of the dog. And the reason why I did that, because I wanted also the fur to remain, as if the fur of the bear is what is covering the wounds. Just a quick note: when you use the move tool and you start moving the selection, make sure to keep holding Alt. And then I use the selective color to change the blood color of the wounds. And it wasn't something that I was looking for. I just started to change the colors to see if there's a more realistic color to add to the scene, and I ended up with this one. And here I duplicated one of the wounds to his head, and then I added a mask. As you can see, I deselected the selections from these two, and then I deselected from here too, and I wanted only this selection to be the eraser. So transform the selection. I click on delete while the black color is on the background. And then I flip the selection to add the third direction of the bear head. After I finish, I highlight this area I selected in the mask, and then I click on Control L to add more contrast between the wound and the fur of the bear, just to help the wound be covered with the bear fur. Then I selected this area right here. I duplicate it and start to move it around the bear body, and then I used this blend if, just because I wanted only this white furs to be the ones that's added, because it didn't make sense that there's only white hairs on his hands, so I wanted to be on his chest, his head, and his legs. I'm so sorry if my English is hard to understand. I'm working on it. Also, it's really hard to narrate an artwork that you already made. Here's the hunter. I used the select subject tool to select it, and then select and mask to add some of the details on the edges. I add radius, feather, contrast, and then I click OK, and then I add the mask, add a new empty layer, fill it with 50% gray to see if there's black or white strokes remained in the cut. And then I use the lasso tool to start to fix some of the areas that the AI messed up with. And then the next step is I didn't like this the green shirt that he's wearing, or the green vest. So I selected, I use the clone stamp tool, start to sample from this army texture suit, and then I start to paint on the green vest. And then when you leave this hard edge between the new texture and the old texture, just selected, highlighted with the selection tool, then click on Shift F5 and then go to content aware, and that will fix it for you. I start to fix the values, of course, and I use the same method of turning the subject to black and white by clicking on Shift Control U, then go to image, apply image, multiply with less opacity, then turn it into multiply, less fill, and then add the blend if, and then mask, and then the mask. And then I start to paint on the areas that's not facing the light source. And it's a diffused light source, so you can just use a soft brush because it's diffused, so it's not supposed to be causing these harsh lights. Then what I did next is I clicked 2 times on the hunter layer. That will bring the layer style, then go to the inner glow, click on reset to defaults. That will add the blend mode screen and all of that. And what I do is I increase the size and I change the blend mode to, I think, to lighten. That will add this halo effect around him in the edges, because these areas are facing the diffused light in the back. And then what I do next is I click on the FX menu, FX icon that will be right there, and then click on create layer, and that will separate the inner glow effect from the hunter layer. Then I start to delete it from the areas of the bottom areas. And then I did the same method of the multiply, but this one on screen, with the screen to make it brighter. I change the blending mode to screen, and then I add some contrast with the levels, and then I add the mask, 50% opacity, the mask, and I use the gradient tool to restore some light from the upper areas. I change the blending mode to normal, and I start to drag the gradient tool, and that will add a brightness in his upper areas, because it looked too dark first, and because there is a very strong light coming from above, it's not supposed to be that dark. Here I'm trying to change and help blend in this hunter with the rest of the image, and because of the grass is have this warm color, and the bear have this warm color, and the tree have this warm color, so it makes sense to make the hunter warm too. So I add some red, as you can see, red, yellow. I didn't know what I do with the magenta. I just wanted to make it as warm as of the rest of the front objects. Here I duplicated the snow area just beneath his leg, because I wanted to add some of snow going through his leg, and that's what I did by adding a new layer, and I sampled the color from the snow beneath him, and I start to paint through his shoes. And then I used this powder, and then I used this powder brush to give this idea like he was stepping on the snow, because he was steady and afraid from the bear, just to add some action and movement to the image. Here I'm adding more trees to the background, because the background felt empty, and what I do is I add the tree, I desaturate it, and I add the exposure, and I make it faded by increasing the offset. And then I give it a cyan color on the naturals with a selective color adjustment layer. I did the same with this tree right here. And here's the tree that replaced the other tree. I changed the tree because I didn't like this one, because it looked too flat. And I used the same snow brushes from the first tree, but this area gave me a problem right here. It didn't look right when I added snow because it's not on the snow. So what I did next is going to be something that you need to focus on. Here I use the apply image and the multiply technique again to make the areas in the middle that's not facing the light source darker. I select the area and as you can see, I turn the blending mode to multiply the opacity on 50%. I'm selecting the tree. I go to select, modify, contrast. I add some contrast and then the feather, just like we did with the bear. Select inverse and then I removed it from the layer. So it's now only affecting the areas in the middle. And then it's the same that I did with the hunter. I added the inner glow. And then I go to the FX, create layer. That will separate the inner glow. And then I start to remove it from the bottom areas. Now I need you to focus on this. What I did to add the grass going through this trunk, I'm clicking right here. I forgot that I'm watching a video. So I went to this stock image of the green grass in the beginning. I select an area from it. I go to select and mask. I add object aware and then radius till I get something like that. Then I add just a bit of contrast. And then I click OK. And now I want this one to be as my eraser. So what I do is I add an empty layer and I add the mask of the new selection. This grass that you see right here. I deleted this area. I only wanted this grass to be the white color right here. I gave it more brightness using the levels. Now I'm deleting these areas too. Now I want to use it as the eraser for my tree right here. So I selected and I went to the tree and I added the mask to the tree first. I went back and select the same grass and then I go back to the mask, and now I'm going to using the transform selection. I wanted to rotate it because it was facing this way, and I dragged it to the bottom of the trunk and I start to click on delete, and because the black color is in the background, it's going to erase it. And now select inverse so I can select only this one that I painted. I go to the move tool and then I hold alt and I start to move it around the tree trunk. And as you can see, it's made that look of the grass going through that tree trunk, and it left this dark color. So what I did is I selected and I clicked on Control L to bring the levels menu to get rid of this dark color on my image. And now, as you can see, this trunk areas looks like there is a grass going through it, and that will add more realism to your artwork. And what I'm doing right here is I use the soft brush with black color. I clicked on the mask on the bear and I start to fix these black strokes by removing them. I added the color channels set to color blending mode, and I added this brownish warm color to the backpack and this belt, and then I made them darker with a brightness and contrast adjustment layer. They look too bright in the first time. And now to add more realism, I used the powder brushes to paint white color on his clothes to give it the look like there was snow falling on him, on his shoulders, his arm, and his hat and his backpack. Now I'm going to add the rain effect and the snow, and that's by adding a new empty layer, fill it with black, then go to pixelate, mesotint, and then change it to coarse dots. Then add blur to it, not too much, 1.5 or 2, 1.5, yeah. Then use the levels adjustment layer to add contrast between the white dots and the black background. We don't want too much points, we just want it to look like snow texture. Then go to the channels, select the RGB, and then add it as a mask, apply it, and then click Ctrl U with the hue and saturation and add the lightness all the way up to the maximum, which is 100. And then go to blur gallery and add path blur to add motion to the snow and the rain. So we are going to do that again, but this time I scaled the texture on 200%, so it's bigger than the last one. This one is also, I added the blur value of 1.5. I added the contrast with levels, RGB, add the mask, apply, and then Ctrl U to restore the white color on the black strokes. Then blur gallery, path blur, and I took the arrow and made it go into the ground, and I took the just a bit to give it like the feel like there was a wind effect. And then the speed is on 25, and I add some taper, I think. No, I didn't. This is the final result of the snow and the mask. You maybe want to change the blending mode of both of them, the snow and the mask, to screen. Now I merged all the layers together by clicking on Shift Control U, Shift Control Alt U, and then I go to blur gallery, path blur, and I start to add this motion effects to the ground, because this is supposed to be an action picture. There was supposed to be movement, so I add the speed of 50%. I believe I added the taper here, yeah, and I also added some of the motion effect because I didn't want to lose details with this movement. I unchecked the centered blur, and then I added the motion blur, and as you can see with the motion blur, it restored the details. Then I click OK. I add the mask to it. I turn it to black, and I start to paint white with the areas on the edges, and also with the bear, just a bit of the bear, because it was supposed to be moving. And for the color grading, I use the camera raw filter. So what I do first is I add just a bit of clarity, 10% clarity, and I don't add those, just a bit of contrast. And then I go to this menu right here. I add the radial gradient. As you can see, I drag till I make this circle, and I start to placing it. So this is a circle which is supposed to be affecting the bright areas. And then I go to the menu right here. I right click on the mask, duplicate it, and then I go to the mask number 1. I right click on the radial gradient, inverse. This area will be affecting the dark areas. So I decrease the exposure to add this vintage effect. I don't know how to say it, just to make the edges of the image darker. And it affected the bear and the hunter, so I didn't like that. This is why I went and decreased the feather, and now it's not affecting them anymore. And then I add the temperature of the blue color. That added the blue color on the edges. And then I go to the mask that's affecting this area. I add some of the exposure, highlights, whites. I don't remember what I increased. So I added the contrast and some of the highlights and the white colors, and then I added the temperature of the warm color. Now the bright areas are warm, the dark areas are blue, cold. And now I go to the color grading and I just start to clicking on the saturation. The saturation will not be over 10. This is a rule that I follow with the color grading on the camera raw filter. It's always beneath 10 with the saturation. And then I start to move the hue to see which one works with me. I ended up using, I ended up with this color grading right here. And then I added the venting. I'm not sure how to pronounce it or say it. You can find it on the effect right here, and it will just add this dark color on the edges. And this is the final color grading. I merge the layers together, and then I turn the final layer to smart objects, and I go to filter, sharpen, smart sharpen, the amount of 19, and then I click OK. And then I click on the smart filter mask. I click Ctrl I to invert it, and then I start to paint white on the areas that I want to be sharp. So what I do is I go back to the layers of the hunter. I select it, I highlight it, and then I start to paint on it. And then I do the same with the bear and the tree to make them sharp. And then I start to paint on the ground because it's closer to the eyes and supposed to be sharp. And this is the final results. This is it for today's video, guys. I hope you got value from it. If you did, please make sure to like this video. Also, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and follow us on our social media platforms. Also, if you want to see more in-depth tutorial like this, make sure to check my latest 2 videos where I made this artwork right here. And if you want to learn more from me in depth, make sure to get my digital landscape course. All the links are going to be down in the description, and I will see you in the next tutorials. Peace.